Maya woke up early that morning, just as the first rays of the sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. She stepped outside her small wooden house and breathed in the cool, fresh air of the countryside. The smell of wet soil and morning dew made her feel alive. Birds chirped in the trees, and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. For Maya, life on the farm was peaceful, almost perfect in its simplicity. She had chosen this life intentionally, leaving behind a world filled with chaos, battles, and endless noise. The farm was small but beautiful. Rows of green crops stretched across the land, and colorful flowers bordered the dirt paths. Chickens clucked happily near the coop, and a pair of cows grazed calmly in the field. Maya loved every corner of her land. She had built it herself, piece by piece, after leaving the military years ago. Working on the farm gave her a sense of purpose, but it also allowed her to heal from old wounds. Her neighbors often admired her work, sometimes stopping by to ask for advice or share a warm smile. Yet, Maya preferred solitude. She enjoyed the quiet and the chance to think, to remember, or sometimes to forget. As she tended to her plants, Maya's mind wandered. She remembered her days as a Marine sniper, the missions she had carried out with precision, and the intense focus that had defined her life. It was a world far removed from the gentle sway of crops and the soft sounds of nature. Back then, she had been known for her skills, the way she could stay hidden for hours, watch her target, and act only at the right moment. She had faced danger that most people could not imagine, but she had survived, often alone. Those memories were bittersweet. They reminded her of strength, courage, and the heavy cost of conflict. Maya brushed her hands on her pants and walked toward the barn, where her animals waited. The cows mooed softly as she opened the gate, and the chickens clucked excitedly. She smiled, patting their heads gently. Taking care of them gave her a feeling of responsibility she liked, a chance to nurture life rather than take it. She fed the animals, cleaned their pens, and checked the water supply. Every small task grounded her, reminded her of the life she had chosen, a life of peace, simplicity, and freedom. After finishing her chores, Maya carried a basket to the fields. She inspected the crops, checking each row carefully. Her hands moved with experience, picking weeds, turning the soil, and ensuring that every plant had enough space and sunlight. She hummed softly to herself, a melody she had made up years ago. For a moment, the world seemed perfect. There were no threats, no alarms, no danger, just the quiet harmony of nature. Despite the calm, Maya's senses remained alert. Years of military training had made her cautious. Even in this peaceful place, she could detect the slightest change, a broken branch, a sudden movement, or a strange sound. It was a habit she could never fully leave behind. She had learned to trust her instincts, and they had saved her many times before. Yet here, on her farm, she only used them to notice the small things, the way the wind shifted, the subtle movements of birds, and the sounds of animals in the distance. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Maya paused to take a break. She sat under the shade of a large oak tree, wiping the sweat from her forehead. In her hand, she held a cup of tea she had brewed earlier. She took a slow sip and looked out over the fields. Everything seemed calm, untouched, and alive. The beauty of the farm reminded her why she had left the past behind. Here, she could choose her own battles, live on her own terms, and find peace that had once felt impossible. Yet, even in this calm, Maya sometimes felt a quiet unease. She knew the world beyond her farm was not always kind. She had seen it, the greed, the violence, and the people who took what was not theirs. But she pushed the thought away, focusing on the life she had built. The farm was her sanctuary, her safe place, and she would protect it. Maya had a deep sense of pride in her independence, knowing that she could face challenges if they ever came. She had survived before, and she could survive again. As the morning turned into afternoon, Maya stood up and stretched. She returned to her work, tending to each row of crops with care and patience. She moved slowly, enjoying the rhythm of the farm and the satisfaction of completing tasks with her own hands. Each step reminded her that she was alive, capable, and in control of her life. Though the memory of her military days remained, it no longer defined her. Here, on her farm, she was free. Maya's quiet life was simple, but it was rich in ways that mattered most. The sun shone warmly on her skin, the animals responded to her gentle voice, and the earth beneath her feet felt steady and true. She had chosen this life, not because it was easy, but because it allowed her to heal and grow. And as she looked out over her fields, she felt a deep sense of belonging, a connection to the land, to her past, and to the person she had become. Little did Maya know, her peaceful world was about to be tested in ways she could never imagine. But for now, she remained under the sun, tending her crops, listening to the wind, and enjoying the quiet strength of her simple life. The sun was slowly climbing higher, turning the sky a bright, clear blue. Maya worked in the fields, carefully tending to her crops, her hands moving skillfully over the soil. The morning had been peaceful, just as she liked it. But as she straightened up and wiped the sweat from her brow, she noticed something unusual on the far edge of her property. A group of men was moving through the distant trees. At first, she thought they were neighbors or travelers passing by. But as they got closer, Maya realized they were different. Their movements were quick, deliberate, and loud. They were scouting, checking the fences and looking toward her house. Something about the way they carried themselves made her heart tighten. She had seen people like this before, those who believed they could take what did not belong to them. Maya's instincts, honed from years in the military, immediately went on alert. She did not panic, but every sense in her body became sharper. Her eyes scanned the approaching group, counting 5 men, all wearing dark clothes and boots that made heavy sounds on the dry earth. They were confident, careless even, moving as though nothing could stop them. Maya's mind raced, calculating the situation. She could stay hidden, protect her home, and ensure that no one got hurt. But first, she needed to watch, to understand. The men approached the fence surrounding her farm. One of them began to cut it with a rusty wire cutter, laughing as if it were a game. Another kicked at the gate, testing its strength. Maya crouched behind a tree, barely breathing, as she observed their every move. She noticed small details: their nervous glances at each other, the way they kept checking behind them, and the casual way they assumed no one would stop them. For a moment, Maya allowed herself a small, quiet smile. They did not know who she was. They had no idea that the woman they thought of as an ordinary farmer was, in fact, a legendary Marine sniper. She had faced life-threatening situations countless times before, and her focus was unmatched. This knowledge gave her calm. She did not need to act quickly, only wisely. She had tools, skills, and experience they could not even imagine. As the men stepped closer to the house, Maya moved silently toward the barn. She needed a vantage point, a way to observe them without being seen. Inside, she found her old rifle, polished and ready, resting on a shelf she had kept specifically for emergencies. She ran her fingers over the smooth metal and wood, remembering the countless hours of training, the missions where every second counted, and the responsibility that came with such skill. She didn't want trouble, but she would not allow her peace to be taken. Outside, the men were careless. They were shouting at one another, tossing items aside, laughing and joking as they explored the yard. One of them kicked over a bucket, spilling water across the dirt path. Another tripped over a small fence post but laughed and waved it off. They believed the farm was abandoned or, at worst, protected only by someone ordinary. They had no idea that every step they took was being watched. Maya took a deep breath, focusing on the present. Her hands were steady, her eyes sharp, and her mind calm. She did not feel anger, only the clarity of purpose. She would defend her home, her animals, and her hard work. She reminded herself of the discipline she had learned in the military: the patience, the observation, the careful timing. Acting too soon could alert them, acting too late could allow damage. She needed balance, as always. The men continued to move through the farm, splitting up to check the barn, the house, and the fields. One of them, a tall man with a crooked hat, approached her vegetable garden. He bent down to pull up a few carrots, unaware of Maya's presence just behind a cluster of trees. Maya held her breath, observing the exact moment to act if needed. But she didn't rush. She wanted them to see that they were in her space, that she was aware, and that she was prepared. As the sun climbed higher, Maya noticed shadows stretching across the ground. The men were making themselves comfortable, setting their bags down and laughing loudly. Their carelessness was dangerous for them, but it gave Maya the advantage. She moved silently from one cover to another, scanning the area, noting their positions, and planning her next steps. Each move was precise, calculated, and careful. In her heart, Maya felt a mix of calm and resolve. She didn't want violence, but she would not allow harm to come to her farm. She had spent years building this life, nurturing it, and protecting it from the dangers of the outside world. Now, those dangers had arrived at her doorstep. But she was ready. She was no longer just a farmer, she was a guardian, trained for moments like this, patient, observant, and prepared. As the afternoon sun warmed the fields, Maya made her final checks. She ensured her rifle was ready, traps were in place around key areas, and her escape routes were clear. She took one last breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin, the sound of birds in the trees, and the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. She was calm, focused, and ready. The men were unaware that the quiet farm they had come to raid belonged to someone far more skilled than they could ever imagine. And as they continued to move closer to the farmhouse, Maya knew that the peaceful life she had built was about to be tested. But she was not afraid. She had faced danger before, and she would face it again, with the same skill, courage, and precision that had earned her a reputation far beyond the fields she now called home. By late afternoon, the sun had moved low in the sky, casting long shadows across Maya's farm. The air was warm but carried a faint tension, almost as if it sensed the danger approaching. Maya crouched behind a thick oak tree, her eyes fixed on the group of men who had been quietly moving closer for hours. They were no longer careful now. Their confidence was growing, and that was a mistake. The gang had split into two groups. One went toward the farmhouse, while the others moved toward the barn. They carried crowbars, ropes, and sacks, talking loudly among themselves. Maya's hands rested on her rifle, her fingers brushing the smooth wood. She remembered every mission, every moment where patience and observation had been the difference between success and failure. Her calm heart belied the sharp alertness in her mind. She didn't need to act immediately, she only needed the right moment. The first sound of real disturbance came when one of the men kicked a bucket near the garden. Water spilled across the dirt, and the noise echoed unnaturally loud in the still air. Maya froze for a moment, listening. The man laughed, unaware that someone was watching him from the shadows. Another man tried the farmhouse door and found it locked. He shook it angrily, assuming no one was inside. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. They did not know that they were dealing with someone trained to anticipate every move. Slowly, she moved toward a small rise in the ground near the barn. From there, she could see the entire yard. The gang was beginning to unpack some tools, intending to take whatever they could. Maya's mind worked quickly, planning how to stop them without unnecessary risk. She wanted to protect her home, her animals, and her crops, but she also wanted to avoid causing serious harm. There was no joy in violence, it was simply a duty she had chosen to fulfill in this moment. Her eyes scanned the barn. One man had already tried to open the door and was struggling. Maya noted his position, the way his weight shifted as he tried to pry it open. Another had wandered too close to the chicken coop, stepping carefully yet nervously. Maya knew that if she acted strategically, she could neutralize their threat before they even realized it. She took a slow breath, centering herself. Her hands were steady as she picked up her rifle. She placed it carefully, sighting the area with precision. Maya didn't need to shoot to cause panic, a single display of skill would be enough. She adjusted her aim slightly, waiting for the moment that would give her the upper hand. Her eyes flicked from one gang member to the next, analyzing their every movement, anticipating their reactions. Suddenly, the tall man with the crooked hat shouted at his companions. "Hurry up! Let's finish this quick." The words broke the quiet, giving Maya the moment she had been waiting for. She aimed carefully, sending a single shot to knock over a bucket near the barn. The sound startled the men, and their heads snapped toward the noise. Their confidence wavered for the first time. Maya remained hidden, a shadow among shadows, her presence unknown to them. The gang began to move toward the noise, thinking it was just some random disturbance. But Maya had already repositioned herself slightly, keeping herself safe and out of sight. She watched as they fumbled with tools, tripping over the uneven ground. Their lack of caution made them vulnerable. Maya felt no excitement, only a focused calm. She was in control, as she had always been. A few minutes later, one of the men decided to check the house windows. Maya's eyes followed him. He leaned down, peering inside, unaware that she had been observing him since morning. Maya's mind raced through options. She could scare them, stop them quietly, or wait for backup from the environment itself. Traps she had set around the farm, simple yet effective. She adjusted a small rope trap near the path they were taking, ensuring it would trip someone if they walked carelessly. The tall man moved toward the barn again. Maya noticed his uneven steps. She released her breath slowly and whispered under it, as if speaking to herself, "Patience." She had learned long ago that patience was more important than speed. One wrong move could alert them to her position, and she wanted to maintain the element of surprise. Her experience told her that fear, carefully applied, was often more effective than force. Then, the unexpected happened. One gang member noticed the chickens scattering from the coop. He laughed nervously, saying, "It's just animals, no big deal." But the sound of movement, the sudden fluttering of wings, made the others pause. Maya smiled faintly. She had used this small advantage, letting nature itself unsettle them. Every instinct, every skill she had acquired, was guiding her actions. Minutes passed like hours, each moment charged with tension. Maya continued observing, adjusting her position, keeping the men distracted and uncertain. Their confidence was slowly turning into unease, though they didn't know why. The farm, which had seemed quiet and simple, was now a place of calculated power and strategy. Maya's calm presence, her knowledge of the terrain, and her preparation made all the difference. Finally, the gang began arguing among themselves, unsure of what to do next. Maya's heart remained steady. She had not yet revealed herself, but she had already taken control. Their carelessness, their underestimation of her, had become their weakness. The farm that seemed peaceful and ordinary was far from it. It belonged to a woman who would defend it at any cost, using skill, intelligence, and experience honed over years of discipline. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Maya adjusted her stance one last time. She was ready for whatever would come next. The raid had begun, but the outcome was not in doubt. She would protect her home, her animals, and her life. The quiet farm might appear calm to the outside world, but Maya knew that strength often hid in silence. And soon, the men would learn just how true that was. The sky was painted with golden light as the late afternoon sun began its slow descent. Shadows stretched across Maya's farm, and a gentle breeze moved through the fields. But for Maya, there was no peace in the beauty of the evening. The gang had grown bolder, now moving closer to the house and barn with careless confidence. Their laughter echoed through the farm, but Maya's sharp eyes saw the cracks in their composure, the small hesitations, the nervous glances, the uncertainty that grew as they realized things were not as simple as they had imagined. Maya crouched behind a stack of hay bales near the barn, her rifle resting lightly against her shoulder. She observed the men carefully, noting their positions, the way they moved, and the gaps in their coordination. She had spent years studying patterns, predicting behavior, and calculating risk. Every movement they made gave her more information. Patience, she reminded herself, was her greatest weapon. Acting too soon could alert them, acting too late could allow damage. Timing was everything. The tall man with the crooked hat began fiddling with the barn door, pulling at it roughly. Maya could see the frustration building on his face. Another man had wandered toward the chicken coop, bending down to examine it. Maya's heart remained calm, but her mind raced with strategy. She didn't need to act violently, yet she needed to make them feel uncertainty, fear, and hesitation. A single, precise display of skill could shift the balance without harming anyone. She reached for a small, lightweight tool she had prepared earlier. It was a simple device, designed to create noise or movement in a specific area, and she set it carefully near the path the gang had taken. A slight trigger, and it would create enough distraction to make them falter. Maya smiled faintly, thinking of the countless hours of training that had prepared her for moments like this. Each step, each observation, each small action was a reflection of her experience and discipline. Then, the first moment of chaos arrived. Maya tripped the device with a subtle movement of her hand, and a small pile of loose cans clattered across the dirt path. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the otherwise quiet evening. The gang froze. One man cursed, spinning in place to find the source. Another tripped over a bucket, losing his balance. Maya remained hidden, her body perfectly still, watching the effect of her action. Their confidence wavered, and she knew she had gained the upper hand. A moment later, Maya decided to assert herself further. She stepped into a partially open area near the trees, allowing the sun to catch the glint of her rifle's metal. It was enough to make one of the gang members shout in surprise. "Hey! Did you see that?" His voice trembled slightly, betraying fear he did not intend to show. The others looked around, confused and unsure. Maya did not need to fire a single shot. Her presence alone conveyed skill, awareness, and power. Slowly, she began moving from one vantage point to another, keeping herself hidden yet visible enough to maintain control. Each step was deliberate, each movement calculated. She observed the gang's reactions closely, noting how they jumped at small noises, how they argued among themselves, and how they began to hesitate in their actions. Her plan was working. Their confidence was fading, replaced by anxiety and doubt. Maya's mind flashed briefly to her days in the military, the countless missions where observation, patience, and precision had been the difference between success and failure. She had faced danger in the most extreme conditions, but the principle remained the same: stay calm, stay aware, and strike only when the timing is right. These men were no match for her experience. She could feel the rhythm of the situation, like a silent dance she had performed many times before. As the gang tried to regroup near the barn, Maya noticed their coordination falling apart. One man wanted to check the farmhouse, another wanted to finish searching the barn. They argued, their voices raised in frustration. Maya used the moment to adjust her position again, placing herself in a spot where she could monitor both areas. She did not feel anger, only clarity. This was about protecting what she had built, preserving the life she had chosen, and ensuring no harm came to her home or animals. She released a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin and the tension in her body ease slightly. But her focus remained sharp. She adjusted her rifle, tested the sights, and ensured that any action she took would be precise and controlled. She did not want to hurt the men unnecessarily, she wanted them to understand that they were not in control, that the quiet farm they thought was easy prey belonged to someone far more skilled than they could imagine. Then, with careful timing, Maya created another distraction. A small rope trap she had set snagged one man's leg as he moved too quickly near the barn. He stumbled, fell to the ground, and shouted in surprise. The others rushed to help him, but their fear was now evident. Maya remained perfectly still, her presence implied but unseen. The farm, which had seemed peaceful and ordinary, had become a place of control and precision. She was not just defending land, she was demonstrating her ability to protect it without unnecessary force, using skill and strategy instead. By the time the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting the farm in golden shadows, the gang had lost almost all confidence. They no longer moved as one, instead, they hesitated, argued, and looked around nervously. Maya knew that soon, she could end the situation entirely. Her calm, her observation, and her preparation had given her control. The quiet farm was no longer just a home, it was a fortress, and she was its guardian. Maya's eyes scanned the horizon one last time before nightfall. She knew the moment to act would come soon, but until then, she maintained patience. She had taken control, and the gang had no idea that every move, every thought, and every fear they felt had been carefully guided by her. Her farm, her sanctuary, was safe for now. And when the time came to finish the raid, she would do so with the precision and calm that had made her a legend long before she returned to this quiet life. The evening air grew cooler as the sun dipped closer to the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Maya crouched in the shadow of a large tree, her eyes scanning the farm. The gang had grown restless. Their earlier confidence was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. They moved more slowly, casting nervous glances at one another, unsure of what was happening. Maya knew the moment for direct action was approaching. She stepped slightly into the open, letting the dim sunlight catch the edge of her rifle. One of the men spotted her and froze, his hand trembling as he reached for his weapon. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. Maya did not respond with words. Her calm presence alone spoke volumes. Her eyes were steady, her posture firm, and her aura radiated control. The gang realized for the first time that they were no longer in charge. Maya took another small step forward, keeping her rifle lowered but visible. She did not want unnecessary violence. She wanted them to understand that she was aware, capable, and ready to defend her home. The tall man with the crooked hat shouted commands, trying to regain control, but his voice sounded hollow. The others looked to him for direction, but the fear in their eyes betrayed their hesitation. They had underestimated her, and now they were beginning to see the truth. One of the men moved toward the barn, trying to gather some tools. Maya raised her hand slightly, and he froze, unsure of whether to continue. Her eyes followed every movement, each subtle twitch revealing their nerves. She remembered her military days, the countless times she had faced situations where patience and presence were more powerful than brute force. Here, on her farm, she could achieve the same result without unnecessary harm. The man in the barn tripped over a rope trap she had set earlier. He fell heavily to the ground, his tools scattering across the floor. The sound made the others jump, and panic began to spread through the group. Maya's lips pressed together in a thin line, her face calm but her mind alert. They were making mistakes because they had assumed she would be easy to intimidate. Now, every error they made played into her control. The tall man finally yelled, "Get her. She's just one person." But his words lacked confidence. Maya's presence had shifted the balance. She stepped further into view, her voice calm yet firm. "Leave now," she said. "Go back the way you came, and don't return." There was no threat in her tone, only authority. The gang hesitated, looking at one another, their earlier boldness shattered. Maya's eyes flicked toward the chickens and cows, making sure they were safe. Her home, the animals, and her crops were all under her protection. She did not need to act violently yet, the fear she inspired was enough. But she was prepared. Every muscle in her body was ready to react if necessary. Her training, her experience, and her instinct were all in perfect alignment. She had faced danger before, and she would face it again. Suddenly, one of the men lunged toward her, trying to grab her rifle. Maya reacted instinctively, moving with speed and precision. In a single fluid motion, she dodged, grabbed his arm, and spun him to the ground. He fell with a thud, groaning in surprise. The others froze, their fear escalating. Maya did not strike unnecessarily, she only used the minimum force to ensure control. Her movements were calm, efficient, and precise, like the discipline she had honed over years of service. Another man reached for a tool, but Maya's sharp gaze stopped him. "Stop," she said firmly. His hand froze mid-motion. Her calmness, her confidence, and her skill created a barrier stronger than any weapon. The gang realized they were outmatched, not by numbers, but by the sheer capability and focus of the woman before them. Maya had transformed the farm into a place of control and protection, demonstrating that strength did not always need to be loud or violent. The tall man finally lowered his head, frustration and fear mingling in his expression. "Fine, we're leaving," he muttered. The others followed, casting wary glances at Maya as they backed toward the edge of the property. Their confidence was gone, replaced by respect and caution. Maya watched them, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. She allowed them to leave, knowing that they would not return. Her calm authority had ensured the safety of her home without unnecessary harm. As the gang retreated into the trees, Maya lowered her rifle and exhaled slowly. Her body relaxed slightly, but her mind remained alert. She walked toward the barn and checked the scattered tools, ensuring that nothing was damaged. The animals were unharmed, and the crops remained untouched. The farm was safe. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling the satisfaction of having defended her home with skill, patience, and discipline. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky in deep purples and blues. Maya stood among her fields, feeling the cool evening air on her skin. Her heart was steady, her mind calm. She had faced a threat, taken control, and preserved the life she had worked so hard to build. Her past had prepared her for this moment, and her present had allowed her to act with wisdom and care. For Maya, the confrontation was over. The gang had learned that the farm belonged to someone who would not be intimidated, someone who combined experience, skill, and courage to protect what was hers. And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Maya returned to her house, feeling the quiet strength of victory. Her farm was safe, her animals were unharmed, and her home remained a place of peace. She sat on the porch, sipping a warm cup of tea, reflecting on the events of the day. Though the confrontation had been tense, it reminded her of the balance she had achieved between strength and serenity. Maya had protected her life, her land, and her peace, and in doing so, she had proven that courage and skill, when guided by wisdom, could overcome even the boldest threats. The farm was quiet again. The sun had fully disappeared below the horizon, leaving only the gentle glow of the evening sky. Maya stood in the middle of her fields, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The tension that had gripped the air all day was finally gone, replaced by a calm that felt almost fragile. Her heart, though still steady, carried a lingering awareness, a reminder that danger had touched her life, but that she had faced it and prevailed. She began walking slowly toward the barn, her eyes scanning the area. Everything seemed intact. The fences were still strong, the barn doors closed, and the animals unharmed. Maya let out a small sigh of relief. It had been a test of patience, skill, and courage, and she had passed. But even in victory, there was a quiet reflection that filled her mind. The men who had raided her farm were careless and bold, but they had underestimated her. And that underestimation had been their greatest mistake. Maya entered the barn and looked around. Some tools had been knocked over, and the ground bore footprints of the gang, but nothing essential was missing or broken. She smiled faintly. It was a small victory, but every small victory mattered. She began cleaning up, putting the tools back in order and sweeping the floor. The act itself was comforting, grounding her after hours of heightened alertness and tension. Each movement reminded her of the life she had built, the independence she valued, and the peace she had fought to protect. Outside, the chickens had returned to the coop, clucking softly as if nothing had happened. The cows grazed quietly, their calm presence soothing Maya's mind. She knelt to feed them, her hands brushing over their soft fur. She felt the connection between herself and her animals, a connection that had given her strength in times of solitude. They had been a part of her world before the raid, and now, they were a part of the reassurance that the danger had passed. As the evening deepened into night, Maya walked toward the edge of her fields. She looked out at the trees where the gang had disappeared, remembering their careless confidence and the fear that had replaced it. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her presence, her skill, and her calm had been enough to protect everything she cared about. She did not need to boast or display power unnecessarily, her actions had spoken for themselves. The farm was safe, and that was all that mattered. Maya sat on the wooden fence, letting the cool night air brush against her skin. She thought about her past, about the years she had spent in the military, and how they had prepared her for moments like this. Each mission had required focus, patience, and careful calculation. Now, that training had been applied not to faraway battlefields but to her own home. She realized that strength was not just about force, it was about wisdom, awareness, and control. The quiet farm, the animals, and the crops had been defended with precision, not recklessness. She allowed herself a moment of reflection. The farm had been her sanctuary, a place where she had hoped to leave danger behind. And though that hope had been challenged, she had discovered that her past could be a tool rather than a burden. The skills she had once feared would follow her now served to protect, not harm. Maya understood that her life was a balance between strength and gentleness, vigilance and peace. And that balance was what made her who she was. Night settled fully over the farm. The stars shone brightly, and the moon cast a soft silver glow across the fields. Maya walked slowly among her crops, checking them one more time. She knelt to touch the soil, feeling its warmth and resilience beneath her fingers. Life continued, steady and patient, just as it always had. She thought about the gang and the chaos they had brought, but she did not dwell on anger or fear. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced a challenge and protected what was hers with skill, care, and courage. Returning to the farmhouse, Maya lit a small lamp inside and began preparing a simple dinner. The routine comforted her, the gentle motions of cooking allowing her to relax after a day of tension. She paused for a moment, looking out the window at the darkened fields. Her farm was quiet once more, and she felt a deep sense of peace settling in her heart. She knew that challenges could come again, but for now, she had defended her home and preserved her life. That knowledge brought a quiet satisfaction. Before going to bed, Maya stepped outside one last time. She inhaled the night air deeply, letting the scents of soil, grass, and flowers fill her senses. She walked among her animals, making sure each was safe and calm. The wind rustled gently through the trees, whispering reassurance. She smiled softly, feeling a connection not only to her farm but to herself. The day had tested her patience, skill, and courage, and she had emerged stronger, more aware, and more at peace. As she returned inside and lay down for the night, Maya reflected on the lessons of the day. Life was fragile, yet strong. Peace was worth protecting, yet it required vigilance. Strength was not just in action but in patience, awareness, and restraint. Her farm, her animals, and her life were safe, and she knew that she could face whatever came next with the same quiet determination that had guided her through the raid. The night was calm, and Maya finally allowed herself to rest. Her heart was steady, her mind clear, and her home secure. She had defended not just her farm, but the life she had chosen, a life of independence, purpose, and quiet strength. And as she drifted to sleep, she knew that tomorrow would bring a new day, full of life, hope, and the ongoing balance between peace and preparedness. The first light of dawn crept gently across Maya's farm, painting the fields in soft gold and pale pink. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of soil and flowers, and the quiet was comforting. After the events of the past few days, the farm seemed even more precious, almost fragile in its beauty. Maya stood at the edge of the field, letting her eyes take in the rows of crops, the gentle sway of flowers, and the calm presence of her animals. She felt a deep sense of gratitude. The memory of the gang's raid lingered only as a quiet reminder. They had come with loud voices and careless confidence, but they had left humbled, and her home remained safe. Maya had acted with patience, skill, and precision. Her past as a Marine sniper had guided her, but her heart had chosen peace over unnecessary force. She realized that her true strength was not in causing fear, but in controlling a situation with wisdom and calm. The farm had survived, and she had survived, stronger and more certain than ever. As she walked toward the barn to check on the animals, Maya noticed the subtle changes in the landscape. A few footprints marked the ground, a reminder of the intrusion, but they were already fading in the morning breeze. The animals moved freely, unafraid, as if sensing the restored safety. Maya knelt near the chickens, gently touching their feathers, and then moved to the cows, speaking softly to reassure them. Her connection to them was deep and mutual. She cared for their lives, and in return, their calm presence reminded her of the peace she had fought to protect. Maya spent the morning tending to her fields. She watered the plants, checked the soil, and pruned the crops carefully. Each motion was deliberate, grounding her after the tension of the recent days. She thought about her past life in the military, the missions, the discipline, and the responsibility she had carried. But she also recognized how far she had come. That life had given her skill and strength, yes, but this life gave her purpose, joy, and a sense of calm she had never known before. Word of the incident had begun to spread quietly through the town. Some neighbors came by, not to intrude, but to express concern and admiration. They had heard about the gang and about the courage of the woman who had defended her home. Maya received them politely, offering smiles and words of gratitude, but she remained private, maintaining the gentle distance she had always preferred. Her reputation was growing quietly, a whispered acknowledgement of her skill and courage. Yet Maya did not seek recognition. Her satisfaction came from knowing her farm and her life were safe. In the afternoon, Maya allowed herself a long walk through the far edge of her property. The sun was warm, the wind gentle, and the birds sang from the trees. She moved slowly, appreciating the details, the curve of the land, the patterns of sunlight across the crops, the sound of the stream that ran near the edge of the property. Each element of her farm represented her efforts, her patience, and her love for life. Protecting it had been her responsibility, and she had done so with skill and care. As the day passed, Maya thought about balance between strength and gentleness, vigilance and serenity. Her actions during the raid had demonstrated both. She had defended her home, yet she had not sought conflict. She had controlled the situation with precision and strategy, ensuring that no one was unnecessarily harmed. She realized that true courage was not in showing power for its own sake but in using it wisely, to protect what mattered most. The evening came quietly, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and purple. Maya lit a small lamp in the farmhouse and prepared a simple meal. She moved calmly through the routine of dinner, appreciating the comfort of normalcy after the past days of tension. After eating, she stepped outside to watch the stars appear in the night sky. The farm was peaceful once more. The animals rested, the fields were quiet, and the gentle rustling of the trees reminded her that life continued, steady and resilient. Maya sat on the porch for a long time, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had faced danger, tested her patience, and applied every lesson from her past life. And yet, she had done so in a way that preserved the peace and beauty of her present life. The farm had remained intact, her animals unharmed, and her spirit unbroken. She realized that her strength, skill, and courage were only meaningful when combined with wisdom, restraint, and care. Finally, Maya walked slowly back inside the farmhouse. She tended to the animals one last time, ensuring they were safe for the night. Then, she sat quietly, listening to the gentle sounds of the night, the wind in the trees, the soft cluck of chickens, and the distant hum of crickets. Her heart felt calm, her mind clear, and her home secure. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself to fully relax. As she drifted toward sleep, Maya reflected on her journey. Her life had taken her from distant battlefields to this quiet farm, and she had discovered that courage and strength were most powerful when combined with care and wisdom. She was a guardian of her own life, her home, and the peace she had fought to create. And in that quiet reflection, she felt complete, knowing that she could face whatever came next with the same calm determination that had guided her through the raid. Maya's farm, her sanctuary, remained a place of life, love, and resilience. She had defended it, preserved it, and strengthened it not through violence alone, but through skill, patience, and careful action. And as the stars shone above, she finally allowed herself to rest, confident that her life, her farm, and her peace were safe. She was not just a woman who had survived danger, she was a guardian, a protector, and a quiet legend in her own right.